today, and of course today we will celebrate the birthday of another incredible Aries, the late great Mayor Harold Washington. And just for the record, I think Aries make great mayors. Today I'm joined by our Commissioner of the Department of Housing, Lisette Castaneda, our Acting Deputy Mayor of Education, Youth and Human Services, Kahari Humphreys, our Deputy Mayor for Community Safety, Gary and Gatewood. We have our Corporate Counsel, Mary Richardson-Laurie, and of course my Chief of Staff is with us today as well, Christina Pasion-Zayas. I'm going to give a brief overview of some of the public safety related updates, and then I'm going to pass it to our Acting Deputy Mayor Humphreys for a short presentation on a report that we are issuing this morning. Looking at the data so far this year, vehicular hijackings are down 53.7%. That's year to date from last year. Violent crime is down year to date by 22.9% from last year. Homicides are down this month significantly. Shootings are down as well. These are certainly positive trends to start this year, but we fully recognize that we have the bulk of our work that still awaits us. It's in front of us. We're going to lean into what we've been doing because it's certainly working. We're going to, of course, try new strategies where we see there's a necessary fit for that. And we're going to work hard every day, of course, to keep our community safe. On Friday, the independent monitoring team filed its latest report on the city's progress on the consent decree. Although we still have a long way to go, the reality is that we have taken significant leaps forward, and the report indicates that. Our preliminary compliance is up to 92%. Our full compliance jumped from 9 to 16%. Superintendent Stelling shares my perspective that constitutional policing is fundamental to building safer communities because it rebuilds trust between residents and law enforcement officers. This report shows that we are continuing to make significant progress on achieving a transformational shift in our city's policing. This weekend, there were 3 promotional flyers of teen trends that were set to take place in Millennium Park, the corner of Ogden and Damon, and in Hyde Park. Through the hard work of community-based organizations, street outreach workers, and our Chicago police officers, we were able to prevent 2 of them from occurring. The Hyde Park gathering did manifest, so we deployed our crisis prevention response unit to the location and ensured that CPD had significant resources to handle the situation. CPD made a handful of arrests, and we will continue to monitor the situation. Although we are glad that we were able to prevent 2 large team gatherings this weekend, as I've said before, one is too many. We want our young people to be able to explore every part of our city. That is their right as Chicagoans. But we cannot allow gatherings to turn violent and put our young people and our entire communities at risk of gun violence. Deputy Mayor Gatewood can speak more about some of the strategies that we are looking to implement, as well as the work that we have done to avoid large team gatherings, and particularly making sure that they don't turn violent. His team has had a number of meetings with stakeholders about this very issue, and we are working towards sustainable solutions. As I've said, our young people need both structure and opportunity. We need accountability, of course, but we also need investment and resources. Acting Deputy Mayor Humphreys will speak to what those investments in our young people accomplished last year and why we need to continue to double down on those projects. Lastly, when thinking about our young people, I want to provide an update to the contract between the Chicago Public Schools and the Chicago Teachers Union. I'm sure many of you are aware that the contract was ratified by 97% of our teachers, as well as all members of the Chicago Teachers Union. That's the highest number in decades, potentially ever. I was proud to help land this contract by bringing folks together right here in this very room. This contract is a win for students, educators, and for all Chicagoans. The contract codifies the doubling of libraries and librarians for our schools, more than tripling the number of sustainable community schools from 20 to 70 over the course of the agreement, smaller class sizes at all grade levels, nurses and social workers in every school on every instructional day, protections for academic freedom. That means no matter what happens at the federal level, Chicago's teachers have the freedom to teach Black history, freedom to make sure that we are protecting our LGBTQ plus students, our undocumented students, and our students with disabilities, and additional investments in sports and arts programming across the district. This contract aligns with my administration's vision to achieve equity in Chicago's schools. I look forward to seeing how the implementation of this current contract uplifts our young people and strengthens our city as a whole. The people of Chicago voted for an educator to land a contract that speaks to the needs of the city of Chicago. The people of Chicago got exactly what they invested in. So thank you. With that, I'll pass it to our acting Deputy Mayor Humphreys for a short presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm grateful today to share a few of the administration's accomplishments and investments in youth of Chicago. We are pleased to announce our latest Youth Impact Report, which details comprehensive efforts being undertaken by the whole of government in partnership with community to support our Chicago's young people. The Youth Impact Report showcases the landmark year of investment, opportunity, and empowerment for Chicago's young people. The report outlines how under Mayor Johnson's administration, the city of Chicago have implemented bold strategies that have significantly expanded employment, educational, and civic engagement opportunities for young Chicagoans across all 77 community areas. The report includes information on the following efforts: youth employment, including details on the 39% increase of summer youth employment since the mayor took office; out-of-school time efforts, including structured investments in 15 historically disinvested communities to build ecosystems to support youth and provide engagements to develop long-term strategy. The Mayor's Youth Commission, wrapping up its 2024-25 year, this advisory council is made up of 40 Chicagoans ages 14 to 19 who represent 28 different community areas. Youth commissioners receive an annual stipend for their work and work closely with City Hall to shape policy, program, and initiatives that directly impact Chicago's youth. And our city departments and sister agencies partners want to acknowledge the commitment of our department and sister agencies. Everyone in the city has been called by the mayor to action to positively impact young people. You will see examples in the final section of the report with the 14 departments and agencies showcasing some highlights from last year. Youth employment progress. In 2024, 27,793 young Chicagoans were hired ages 14 to 24 through One Summer Chicago, the city's flagship youth employment program. That's a 15% increase from 2023 and an impressive 39% increase from 2022. These summer jobs offer to young Chicagoans give paid work experiences that build skills, strengthen resumes, and foster financial independence. In addition to the summer programs, the city has created over 2,000 year-round youth employment opportunities, ensuring income for young people beyond just the summer months. The Peacekeeper Pilot Program, in partnership with Good Kids Mad City and the Department of Family and Support Services, is a 6-week training pilot that was launched for 100 young people between ages of 16 to 24 through One Summer Chicago program last year. The pilot trained young people to become peacekeepers, equipping them with the skills to foster safety and promote positive change in their communities at the community level. DSSS, our Department of Streets and Sanitation Labor's trainee pilot, in partnership with CPS and the mayor's office, launched a 12-week training program where 70 young people, the CPS graduates, were participants. And of those 70 participants, 55 of them were hired into full-time roles at DFSS. And then also highlighted is the Inclusive Summer Job Expo, a partnership with DFSS and the Mayor's Office for People with Disability, where we hosted an event focused on connecting teens and young adults with disabilities to One Summer Chicago job opportunities. The event welcomed 190 young Chicagoans and their family members. And this event also offered valuable career resources, including resume assistance, job readiness support, and information on year-round employment opportunities. There are also out-of-school time highlights in the report. Last year, 155 youth-focused safe space kickback events were planned by youth and led by youth, and had an attendance of over 16,000 Chicagoans. This pivotal strategy is what we have to ensure that teens have spaces designed for them that are safe in their communities and across the city. There will also be more events planned by teens this summer. All events that will be made made available to the public through the My Chi, My Future website and app, and on their Instagram account. The My Chi, My Future micro grant program distributed $600,000 in small grants to community youth programs across the city, which naturally led to local organizations creating additional youth employment opportunities and community events. Also, the My Chi, My Future website is a mobile app, and it connected over 50,000 youth and caring adults to more than 45,000 opportunities in 2024. Over 200 organizations provided information that was available on this platform, including Chicago libraries and the Chicago Park District. So for more information, you can find the digital version of this report today with the link on the screen, and we will also be distributing printed copies to our community partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll take questions.
Okay, we're just going to do questions today, no monologues. We'll start with Marianne.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mayor. And perhaps if you don't have the answer to this, perhaps Deputy Mayor Gatewood would. An incident on Friday evening, someone trying to get downtown using a ride share. The ride share had a blocked off map and said no rides downtown. And we wondered if perhaps the city or the police department is working with the ride shares during times of possible teen takeovers to prevent people from coming into the city.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you for that question. What I will tell you is we try to explore every avenue. There are times where we look at geofencing. That could have been one of those times. So we do look at geofencing in large events, sort of like Lollapalooza and other areas, to really think about how we can maintain some of the traffic and foot traction downtown. So we can get back to you with specifics on whether or not that was the case last Friday.
And so I guess you can opt out. You can still come if you want, but are you trying to warn people and say, hey, maybe this isn't a good time to come here?
Well, no, what we're trying to do is make sure, like we've always done, limit the amount of traction, especially if we know that there's going to be a teen trend. A lot of the work that we do ahead of time is to try to eliminate those. I think we actually eliminate a lot more than are covered. So let's say there's 10 planned, we typically knock 9 of them out, sometimes 10. And this is all a part of that work that we do to eliminate these from happening.
Great. Thank you very much. Mayor, what about hearing two names? One, of course, that I've heard many times, Christina Passiones-Eyes. And I know you've said no, but might she be the interim CPS chief as Pedro Martinez is leaving at the end of the school year? And what about John Roberson? Is he headed to the CTA?
Well, let me just say that between my Chief Operations Officer, John Robertson, and my Chief of Staff, Christina Passion-Zayas, these are two incredible Chicagoans that have dedicated their lives to public service. I've enjoyed their counsel as well as their leadership as we have worked to transform the city of Chicago. I have not made any permanent decisions regarding either one of them, but I will say this, that they are two incredibly talented individuals, and the city of Chicago is certainly blessed to have them both, and I am personally to have them part of my administration.
Mayor Johnson, President Trump is saying that he's going to yank $3.5 billion from the city's budget because your sanctuary city policies are dangerous. Many Chicagoans agree. A woman in Streeterville was just robbed, armed robbery by a Venezuelan migrant who was out on electronic
We need the
monitoring. What do you say to the Chicagoans who ask me to ask you, when are you going to stop spending all of their tax dollars on protecting migrants and start spending their dollars protecting them?
Well, clearly we are investing in the protection of our city. That's why violent crime is down significantly in the city of Chicago. Homicides are down, shootings are down, shooting victims are down, robberies are down, vehicular hijackings are down. We're all trending in the right direction. Now, no one is going to dispute that we still have work to be done, but our investments in housing, our investment in youth and workforce, our investment in behavior and mental health care services, many people believe that somehow these investments would take years to manifest. Well, that's obviously inaccurate, and we are proof positive that when you invest in the people of Chicago, the outcomes for people improve. So violence is down, investments are up, and we'll continue to move in that direction to build a more inclusive economy for everyone.
Well, you say that the violence is down.
It's not that I'm saying that, it's actually what it is. So it's
Well-
actually true.
Well, that's not how the residents feel.
Well, this is not about feelings then, and this is certainly not about what you read, because clearly you're not reading the right information. Violence is down in the city of Chicago, and investments are up. Now look, no one is going to argue that we still have more work to do, and no one has taken on this issue as aggressively as I have. You know, raising a family in this city, like many other families are, there's a great deal of trepidation and anxiety that's coming from the federal government. We're not going to be intimidated by the proclivities of this current administration that has shown a great deal of disdain towards working people. The people of Chicago will be defended by my administration.
Well, despite that,
What's your next question, sir?
there's the continued threat that residents feel, especially in regards to these violent black teenage mobs.
Okay.
They are asking for a meaningful plan. You say that you want the teenagers
we
to
need
have
the
safe
question, or we need to keep
spaces,
moving. We have too many people
but,
here waiting.
excuse me,
Come
you
on.
didn't interrupt anyone else's questions.
Let's
Please
go.
stop
Yeah, we got to
interrupting,
keep
okay?
moving. We got to keep moving.
Question, Bill.
But despite the fact that you keep saying that you want safe spaces for the teens, what the residents are, especially in the Streeterville area, are saying is, what about safe spaces for them? They feel that
Okay.
they're being
Okay. That was your
forced
question. Thank you.
to,
Thank you.
Look, I think I understand your question. I mean, your question basically is, how do we make sure that we have safe spaces for everyone around the city? And the way we do that, it's a couple of things. One, we have to make sure that we're making critical investments in all of our communities, and we're doing that. Making sure that people are accountable, but also making sure that there are opportunities, and that's exactly what we're doing. Thank you for those questions. I appreciate you.
Good morning, Mayor. You talk a lot about transparency in your administration. I'm wondering if you can comment on something in today's Office of Inspector General report that they received a complaint that an employee was hired due to the political connections of a family member. OIG reviewed the hiring records associated with a deputy mayor position, but it was kind of muddled in class specifications for them to kind of get to the bottom of it. Can you talk to us about who this person is and what your office is aware of as far as this investigation
I
is
really
concerned?
can't. I have no idea what you're talking about, sir. First of all, everything that you said was a mouthful. So I just want to make sure that, no, it's not about the pace, but you talked about that there is classification of an alleged family member connected to a deputy mayor. Like, that just doesn't make any sense at all.
Just reading the report that says after receiving a complaint that an employee was hired.
So there's no such, so no one in my family, works for me. So I can just clear that up.
Okay, so your reaction.
No one in my family works.
I don't think the allegation is that a member of your family.
Okay,
but
well,
that a
hold on
family
then. Well,
member-
let's do this. Maybe I do need you to slow down.
Okay.
So why don't you start over with your question? not the monologue. Just ask the question.
It's not a monologue. I'm reading what the Inspector
But
General
just
report.
ask the question.
The question is, can you comment on the Inspector General's report today that said an employee was hired due to political connections of their family member, and that the OIG reviewed the hiring records associated with a deputy mayor position, but they couldn't get to the bottom of it? I'm hoping you can help us get to the bottom of it.
I have no idea what they're referring to, what
Okay.
the OIG is referring to.
Let me ask you about some sort of kitchen table budgeting that a lot of Chicagoans are dealing with today, the sticker shock of summer camp programs. I know your office has sort of flagged this, saying, hey, the rates are going up this year because COVID dollars are going away. But for a lot of people, it's just becoming a reality now. What is your message to Chicago families who are kind of realizing the price is going up in a big way?
Well, again, I mean, I think we've talked about this before, the impact of what's happening at the federal level and how that is impacting local municipalities. My ultimate desire, of course, is to create as many free, safe spaces as possible. Programming in Chicago, from a variety of programs that we offer, do require us to have staff and paid staff. What I would encourage families to do is to continue to work with my administration as we work for more progressive revenue so that programming across the city can be better supported. But certainly I'm aware that, as someone who has children, and I sign my kids up for activities, there are costs associated with that. But again, as I've said last week, the average family, based upon Trump's tariffs, could cost them $4,000 a year. So these are real challenges that we do have, and we're going to do everything in our power locally to provide as many safe, free, affordable programs as possible.
Hi, Mayor. On Wednesday, the City Council is expected to approve a $32 million settlement for a St. Louis man who was injured as a result of a Chicago police pursuit. That will exhaust the city's entire $82 million budget set aside to cover settlements and verdicts for police misconducts. Does the city need a new strategy in dealing with lawsuits that allege misconduct by Chicago police, given the fact that it's only 4 months into the year and that entire budget is gone?
Thank you for that question. I'm going to turn it over to our corporate counsel that is working on a variety of things out of her office.
I would like to say I'm pleased that you asked me that question, but I will just say that from a budget standpoint, the only thing that we can do is do a projection. That projection is provided to the budget department, and they assess the dollar figure. There are quarterly meetings that happen between my department, the budget office, sometimes police department, where we do a reevaluation of those dollars. So what you will likely see is an adjustment that happens throughout the year. What impacts that is the settlement amounts. Some of those are largely unknown. Some predictions one can make, but largely unknown because it depends on the parties with whom we're negotiating for settlement. But what you will likely see is an adjustment that will happen throughout the year on a quarterly basis so that we can meet our obligations, both in terms of legal obligations and our budgetary obligations.
The city is facing more than 200 lawsuits that name one of 3 Chicago police officers, former Detective Ronaldo Guevara, former Commander John Burge, and former Sergeant Ronald Watts. Should the city negotiate a global settlement involving those specific officers to reduce the toll to Chicago taxpayers?
Refer back to our corporate counsel that, look, we have inherited quite the mess, right? Many of these cases that we're referring to happened, decades ago. But I do know that our corporate counsel is fully aware of the cases that we have to address, and I know her department is working through a variety of options.
Hi. Thank you for the question. Each of those individuals, the plaintiffs are represented by an individual counsel. So I just want to be sure that we're properly characterizing the notion of global doesn't really apply, because each of them approaches it based on the advice and counsel they get from their particular counsel. That said, what we did do the latter part of last year, we stood up a new division called the Mass Torts Division. That particular division centers itself largely around a particular officer, where there were a number of cases associated with said officer, and that was former Officer Watts. That there are over 180 cases that remain in that category. So that is one methodology of if you will, placing a group of cases around a particular officer on a path for negotiations for settlement and, if applicable, trial. We separately, through our reverse convictions division, have a division that centered itself around Guevara cases and other such cases. It is that area in which we're making a number of adjustments based on facts and circumstances as we have understand them now on these very aged cases, because there are difficulties in finding witnesses. Some of the officers have passed on, many of whom have moved out of state. But the nature of settlement is that you do have to have someone on the other side that's willing to settle the cases as opposed to pursuing it to trial. But they're challenging cases without a doubt. But we're going to be talking to the alders about a number of approaches we're taking with these very aged cases. It will include settlement, but there will be other approaches that we're going to be taking to address the hundreds of cases that remain.
Hi, Mayor. Wanted to ask you about the impact of President Trump's tariffs, particularly on travel. Have you seen an impact specifically to Chicago travel numbers?
So I've not received any of our first quarter numbers. You know, traveling to the city of Chicago, that uptick typically happens during this season as we go into the summer months. But, you know, again, what we do know is that the instability of the federal government has caused a great deal of consternation and an anxiety. We're going to do everything in our power to stabilize our economy, and the city of Chicago is still the best place on the planet to visit. But, you know, I guess that's still to be determined.
And I guess as a follow-up, obviously, you know, Governor Pritzker has been asked to go to Congress to the same hearing that you went to. I guess, you know, from one elected official to another, do you have advice for him? Would you recommend hiring a law firm like you did? Was that something you felt helped you in prepping?
I mean, look, that's a personal decision for the governor. You know, what I do know is that, you know, we work very hard in the city to protect working people. And, you know, our status as a welcoming city is one that was developed and birthed out of the aspirations of Mayor Harry Washington and Mr. James Montgomery, the first Black corporate counsel, which we're hoping to honor him next month. And what it has done, it's proven that the Welcoming City Ordinance ensures that our local law enforcement focuses on local issues. But the governor is very much committed to maintaining the status as a sanctuary state, which of course we all know was codified by a Republican governor. And, you know, I just hope that we can, you know, focus our attention on working people because I firmly believe that's where the energy has to be, that whether you are documented or undocumented, whether you are a descendant of slaves, what have you, that the people of this country are looking for a government to offer up some certainty around how their quality of life can be either achieved or maintained. And that's what my focus is going to be.
Good morning, Mayor.
It really is. The Cubs are in first place and the White Sox are, you know, they doing all right.
Well, Mayor, your first quarter's legislative agenda in City Council in Springfield largely didn't get over the finish line. Do you expect your policy agenda to pick up in the next few months? And what do you think were the roadblocks last quarter?
Which things are you referring to?
Outlined in the first quarter was, you know, hemp, the Anjanette Young ordinance, green social housing loan, the cumulative environmental impact ordinance.
It's still in place, right? I mean, look, there's a process that we go through.
And as someone who is committed to collaboration, it's making sure that we're listening to all stakeholders and voices in this effort to ensure that, that our policies reflect our values. As much as I recognize that there are people that would like to see things move quicker, I was talking to a state senator who carried a bill for Mayor Richard M. Daley, and it took him 16 years to pass that bill, and Mayor Richard M. Daley wasn't even mayor once he passed it. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to, take that type of length of time, but what I'm just simply saying is that what my administration has been able to accomplish in just 20 months rather, from paid time off, from abolishing sub-minimum wage, to settling the teacher's contract, settling Local 73's contract, Chicago Police Department's contract, to our Cut the Tape initiative that is expediting how we do business in the city of Chicago, the growth of our youth employment. Again, almost 4,000 affordable homes have been built. It's clear that our agenda is moving at a pace that I don't think people anticipated. Opening up 3 mental health clinics, violent crime is down. Some people reported that our ideas that it would take years for the manifestation of those investments to take root and then to show some fruit from that labor. But yet here we are. Look, I'm committed to making sure that the values that I ran on and that the people of Chicago expect me to deliver on, that we're going to do everything in our power to ensure that. As far as roadblocks, it's like any other parliamentary or procedural elements where, you hear the experiences of other experts who have a vested interest in any variety of the things that you just mentioned. We're going to continue to listen to them, but I'm confident we'll, build the coalition that's necessary to see these things come to pass.
Thank you. And what budget contingency plans are you exploring, if any, for if the Trump administration makes good on its threat to revoke $3.5 billion in federal funding?
No, thank you for that question. These aren't threats anymore, right? These are real, adversarial attacks against working people. One of the reasons why we were so adamant about the $1.25 billion investment for housing and economic development, so that we don't have to rely upon the federal government for everything. Same thing with our infrastructure investment, under $830 million to respond to these areas. We're starting the process a lot earlier than we've ever have. I believe in the history of Chicago, so that we can bring all stakeholders together to begin to think about, how we might approach this. One thing that I can tell you this for sure, Chicago will continue to lead the way in investing in people and ensuring that we're protecting workers. And we're going to take all of those ideas from the business community, from our alders. We're going to continue to work with our legislators, right, in Springfield. They have a $3.1 billion budget deficit that they have to close. These are deficits that exist all over the country. We've been able to manage over this last couple of budgets, and thank God that we have a very strong, dedicated administration that has put forth ideas that have maintained and held the line. And this is going to be tough. It's going to be hard, but this is Chicago. We're up for it.
Hey, Mayor. Hey. Alderman Brian Hopkins is working on changes to his curfew ordinance that could come up for a vote tomorrow to make any earlier 8 p.m. curfew more targeted. Are you opposed to that effort, and what do you think about his curfew push?
Well, look, as I said before, I don't believe creating, policies for a very narrow space in the city of Chicago is the right approach, because that's not really dealing with the actual issue. And the issue is that we do have to hold people accountable, but we also have to make sure that there are opportunities for folks. So diverting the problem somewhere else, that doesn't reflect my values. And I believe most Chicagoans don't want to see that. What I can tell you is that there are a number of stakeholders that are coming together. Alderman Hopkins has been amenable to some of the suggestions that have been placed on the table, and we're going to continue to bring people together to make sure that we're doing something that's right versus just simply reactionary.
Thank you. Will a new contract for gun violence detection technology be issued before the start of the summer, and why is this specific technology a priority for you?
Well, look, public safety is my priority, right? It's not one thing, right? This is the number one priority that I have. And if you, again, as I've indicated, we're going to do everything necessary to build safer communities. And then look, here's, some positive news. We know the bulk of our work is still in front of us, but, at the height of the detection that, we parted ways with, you had some of the most, you had some of the highest numbers of homicides and shootings that we had seen in the city of Chicago over the course of, decades. We're already seeing a decline without the technology, right? And so this is why, for me as mayor, and I know some others, have a, more narrow kind of view of this work, but what I bring to this conversation is far more comprehensive. So it's why we're very adamant about expediting getting to 200 more detectives. And we're seeing the benefit of how violent crime, when it does occur, the clearance rate is much higher. The helicopters, right? The mental health support, right, in our communities. Showing up with jobs and economic opportunities, right? I mean, if it was just one, if it were just one thing that could make us all safe, I believe the city of Chicago would have purchased that before I became mayor. It's not just one thing. It's going to take all of us. It's also going to take, our business community as they have stepped up and they are raising money for violence prevention, and our CVI workers. There's a whole plethora of ideas as well as policies that we've implemented that I believe are attributed to the decline that we are experiencing. So, we're going through that RFI process, and, we'll see who manages to move to the top, and we'll make the appropriate decision when that time comes.
Mayor, how are you?
Pretty good. So I failed to mention, I'm sorry, not just the Cubs and the Sox, but the Bulls are in a playoff game. How about that? So I'm feeling pretty great.
Is that a new haircut you got? Looks
okay,
good.
All right. Knock it off, Craig.
I wanted to circle back to Brian Hopkins and this ordinance. Yeah. Is there any kind of modification or amendments to an 8 p.m. curfew that you might be amenable to that, you could work with police and alders and people in Streeterville, for example, to make everybody feel safer and yet still allow the kids to have some ability to go everywhere in the city, as you said?
Yeah, so again, the issue is if you just simply create a curfew within a parameter or boundaries, that first of all, I would question just the constitutionality around that, right? I mean, I'm not a constitutional law professor, but if you're only targeting a particular area, I believe and I see a scenario in which that just simply pushes the challenge elsewhere. What our approach has been, again, making sure that we are keeping people safe and holding people accountable if, they work outside of, the parameters of what, every person in society, I believe, holds to certain, morals of what safety constitutes as. Look, as a parent, and I was talking to my son about this, yesterday, because there was a situation that broke out yesterday, in a different setting, but for many young people, they want to be able to enjoy the city and be safe, right? Because it could potentially, if we don't hold to certain safety elements, it could ruin it for other people. The last thing that I'll say to this is that there is a table that we've convened, right, where we're working through a variety of possibilities. My main responsibility and goal is to keep people safe, and especially our young people. And we don't want violence to be, the experience that they have, because that happens enough already in this city. So the table is open, and we're discussing ideas. And Alderman Hopkins is a bright human being, and I know his heart's in the right place. We just want to make sure that we do something that works for the entire city.
Could you speak to this past weekend? Deputy Mayor Gary Gatewood spoke to that 2 of the 3 teen trends, or whatever we want to call them, were prevented. Could one of you speak to what contributed to that, and is this some new policy that you're going to try to institute in coordination with the police to try to prevent these?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I just, before I pass it to our deputy mayor, these invitations come quite frequently, right? And there are a number of of these invites that don't materialize because of the hard work that is done. But I'll pass it to our Deputy Mayor Gatewood to speak specifically to some of the strategies that we use. We don't want to divulge all of them, right? Because some of these individuals who are promoting these events, believe it or not, they do watch my press conferences.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a great question, Craig. We can go back to last summer where we saw spikes in teen trends, and we did a lot of work to help eliminate those, including working with the Fourth Ward and hiring a young person who was promoting those teen trends, who actually helped us put together Peace Palooza in the Fourth Ward. So, when the mayor often talks about youth employment, that's a prime example of a young person who was helping lead that charge, who we brought in to help work with us and kind of stop some of those. In regards to some of the additional work that happens, that is a strong line of communication between the Chicago Police Department, the Office of Emergency Management Communications, our partners in community violence intervention, and so many other folks come to the table together to have a better understanding of how we deploy resources, how we communicate with promoters, and some of the other work. And I will say, in regards to the table that the mayor mentioned, we met with Alderman Hopkins, Alderman Robinson, Alderman Conway's office, and also Alderman Riley's office just last week to talk about not just a curfew, but honestly how we look at large gatherings overall and how we can partner with each other. So it is not just one community, because we've also had conversations with people in the Streeterville community. So we've been very intentional about our outreach and what we plan to roll out throughout the summer. We're going to listen to the young folks. We're going to listen to those community members. We're going to listen to faith leaders. All of us are going to come together to develop a policy that can continue to help the decline in teen trends. Now, obviously, you're not going to stop all of them, because just again, like as I mentioned, there were 3 promoted, but the one that happened a couple of weeks ago wasn't promoted, and we stopped 3 that day. So we're going to continue to do our work to work with the people who are organizing those and continue to deploy the resources as necessary to try to put a stop to them before they happen or before they get out of control.
Almost good afternoon there.
Yes, almost good afternoon. Thank you.
Following up on what you were talking about, the latest teen gatherings that have happened downtown, what are your feelings on the overall feeling of people who live in those areas where these are happening, and their fear that they've expressed to us in interviews? And also, what are the alternatives that are being considered beyond this, and to divert the kids, as you were talking about? If you are able to knock one out before it starts, where are they going? Are they staying home, or what are the things that are happening beyond that?
Those are excellent questions. Let me just say, about the first part of your question, it is not just frightening. It is overwhelmingly cumbersome. And, I'll just speak on a very personal level, because some of these matters don't make the news. I've lived in a couple of communities in Chicago, where whether it was documented as a teen trend or not, you're coming home after, a tournament with your kids, and it's 9 o'clock at night, and there's an apartment building on the end of the block that invited some people over, and it spills over into the streets. That can be very intimidating and fearful. So I know that feeling personally, right? These are not situations that have merely broken out in this particular section of the city. There are a number of gatherings that, in some instances, in some of our neighborhoods, they start off as a birthday party, or just kind of hanging out on the inside of the house. And then more people get invited, and then it spills over onto the block, onto the major, street that's connected to that particular block. And, you're trying to drive your car through, and people won't move out of the way, and, you're getting looks. I'll just say it like that. And I know there are a number of people in Chicago that have experienced that, particularly on the west and south sides. So we're very familiar with that. And this is why, I think it's so critical. I mean, I think to the last part of your question, of why we have to have a holistic approach, because we've seen where in some neighborhoods where these, they're not referred to as trends or teen takeovers, but they're large gatherings where they've gotten out of control and someone, has a gun, and then it leads to a mass shooting, right? Ultimately, what our desire is to have a full strategy that involves and encompasses everyone. Because I think to the inference that you were making or reference that you were making about making sure that it just doesn't, metastasize, right, or redeploy somewhere else, that is not what I believe the people of Chicago want as relief, just long as it doesn't happen over here. Our approach is to make sure that it doesn't happen anywhere. And there are a number of strategies that we have used to help, pipe that type of activity down. But it's something that we're working on, right? I mean, I think the last thing that I'll say is these type of large gatherings, what are now referred to as teen trends, they were called something else 15 years ago, right? So this is, as the Bible says, there's nothing new under the sun, but our approach certainly has to be far more innovative to ensure that we keep people safe, and then we hold people accountable if they work outside of the parameters of the law.
Okay. Governor Whitmer made headlines visiting the White House recently. Mayor Lightfoot went to the White House during the first Trump term to have meetings. You know where it's going. With the budget in mind, with your budget in mind for the city, what are your thoughts on having a meeting with the Trump administration to try and, for lack of a better phrase, kiss the ring to be able to stop the federal funds from being held back from the city of Chicago?
Well, I will just say, outside of a 2016, Cubs World Series ring, I'm not kissing a ring, okay? All right, so. I actually think, all right, let's break news, okay? I'm gonna make my comms director get upset here. The President of the United States of America has an open invitation to the 5th floor of the greatest freaking city in the world, the city of Chicago. He can come talk to me. And here's, in all sincerity, Al Raby invited Dr. King to come to Chicago. He was one of many. And just not too far, just around the corner here, Dr. King was in the office with Mayor Richard J. Daley. And I think that it's pretty well documented of their relationship and how they felt about one another. I am open and willing to talk to anyone. There's a long history of, and I'm going to just be bold here for a second. There's a long history of black political leaders talking to people who may not see us as first class. In fact, Frederick Douglass spoke to individuals that only counted him 2/3 worth of a human being. Whether it's the White House or whether it's the 5th floor, I have a responsibility to working people and advocating on behalf of working people. But trying to force your will to break the spirit of working people in order to have a conversation, that's terrorism. We're not going to negotiate with terrorists. We're going to negotiate on behalf of working people in this city. And that's what American people want us to do. There's a reason why he's losing support. Now, he doesn't care. He doesn't. But I have a responsibility to make sure that I'm advocating for the people who want our schools to be well-funded, that our public health is well-funded. We had a police officer who was a mother and a wife, who was walking around and doing this job clearly in pain. Clearly in pain. This president refuses to see our humanity. There are families who are desperately looking for good paying jobs and are worried about whether or not their ends are going to meet. And his response to this economy is to give tax breaks and benefits to the ultra rich while the rest of us are struggling. Now, I'm happy to talk to them, but I'm going to tell them the truth. You got to show up for working people in this city, in this country, and not for the oligarchs and the ultra rich. That's what has destroyed our economy, is that we have the ultra rich who continue to receive tax breaks while the rest of us have to pay for their failures. He should get here as soon as possible, because the people of Chicago and this country need him to actually show up for working people.
And just so your words are not misconstrued somehow, you said you're talking about terrorism. You're not calling the president a terrorist?
No, what I'm saying is trying to hold people hostage and manipulating them to succumb to his will and then hold up our tax dollars. That is how terrorists behave. And look, he's not going to hold the people of Chicago ransom.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
Sort of following up on that, but from another direction, how satisfied are you with how Congress, whether it be our delegation or any delegations, are confronting what's happening to the cities like this and around the country?
Look, I know there are a lot of people who serve this country in Washington who believe, as I do, that they have a responsibility to ensure that the lives of everyday people improve. Unfortunately, you have extremism in this country that has intimidated the Republican Party. Look, I'm not saying Democrats are perfect. In fact, every political battle that I've been in has been in primarily with Democrats, right? I've taken on Democrats in this city, in this state, in this county, who came up short. But it is very clear that the party right now that is demonstrating a level of weakness and tepidness are Republican leaders who know that this president is off. Everybody knows he's off. And somehow they thought that he was going to turn it on once he got elected. And where the dissatisfaction is that we have extremism in this country that refuses to hold him accountable. The evolution of our democracy can be attributed to how workers and families fought back to ensure that the prioritization of the government was on everyday people. May Day is coming up, and another marker and an indication of how our democracy has evolved. And I am highly disappointed that his own party won't provide some level of check and balance to his approach. And here's the thing, the last thing that I'll say on this is that, when Ronald Reagan was president of the United States of America, Mayor Harold Washington was the mayor. I just want to remind people the words that Mayor Harold Washington articulated so well, that our continent is built on cities. This country is not a country for the people, by the people, of the people, if the cities are not secure. That's why it wasn't a coincidence that the governor of Texas attacked our city. They were working to destabilize democratically run cities and then to do it under the guise of immigration reform. No, these individuals never wanted to solve a problem. They wanted chaos. We brought order and structure to this city under extreme circumstances and then turned that system into a one system initiative in which we are housing families who are unsheltered, of which 89% of them are Chicagoans. The vast majority of them are black, and now one person is on a waiting list who calls for shelter. We had to take that crisis, manage it, turn it into an operation so that it works for people. Unfortunately, this president is determined to destabilize cities like Chicago. And it is incredibly reprehensible and sometimes even feels incorrigible at times that this individual refuses to recognize the value of the cities of this country. And so I believe that our Illinois delegation, I mean, they're strong, fierce, unapologetic about their values. And they're aligned with our vision for more affordable housing and investing in our public schools, ensuring that public and mental health support services are there, driving violence down in the city of Chicago. So like really the challenge has to be amongst the people. Like we have to come together. I believe what Senator Sanders and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are doing all over the country, organizing people. That's what it's going to take in this moment. It's not going to come down to a single politician, but it's only going to come down to a singular focus of ensuring that working people and our values are front and center.
Thank you for that. Let me go back to the issue of the settlements and judgments involving police misconduct. Granted, almost everything that we're dealing with now happened years, decades ago, but what are we seeing in terms of what's happening now? Are we seeing numbers, whether they are in cases or in complaints, that suggest that the kinds of reforms that have been put in place are starting to take hold, that we're not going to keep seeing these numbers going forward?
Yeah, it's an impressive question. It really is. So I just think it requires an impressive brain to lean in as well, Mary Richardson Laurie. I will say though, as indicated before, constitutional policing is certainly the model that's been fully embraced. 92% of the compliance level, where there's at least some degree of compliance. Ultimate compliance, we're at 16%. There's better training that has taken place, and to your point, that there are stronger policies that reduce some of the interactions that have led to misconduct. In terms of specific outcomes that we're seeing as a result there, I don't know if Mary or Garen, if you want to jump in on that.
Sure. Thank you for the question. Certainly, the orders that existed then are not orders that exist now. The methodologies around policing are not what it is now. Even how we view and treat the cases has evolved considerably over time. And all of those learnings roll up into having better outcomes today. We have fewer reverse, I think we had 4 coming in all of last year that are associated with reverse conviction. So we have fewer cases coming in now, but we do have still some of those old cases. But what I want the public to understand, we don't still have those old policies. And what I'd further like the public to understand is that the law department works with the police department and the other operational departments so that we inform what we see on the legal side, and they can modify what they implement with respect to policies. Garion?
Mary, I think you knocked it out of the park. And obviously we've seen a change in how policing is operated, especially under this administration and the mayor's leadership, just from the level of engagement that police officers are having in communities. Some of the oversight bodies in that partnership there, it's been very intentional about the way police are showing up in particular spaces. I mean, one key example would be how we've expanded the police and community violence interventions partnerships and their professional understanding. How we're expanding some of that workforce to really show up in different ways in communities to lead to different results. I mean, if you look at last year, some of the biggest decreases in crime were in areas of the city where we have seen the largest areas of disinvestment. The 11th district led the city in a decrease in homicides and shootings, followed by the 7th district. So these are areas that have been historically plagued by violence and not the best relationships in policing. So it's been important that we have done our work along with the Chicago Police Department under the mayor's leadership, and obviously with the leadership and support of the Department of Law, to help build those relationships in those communities so we can work towards better outcomes. I mean, we're still paying tickets from 20, 30, 40 years ago. And obviously, there are things that we have to change in this administration. So 30 or 40 years down the line, Mayor Johnson's 74th administration, people aren't paying those same tickets from now. So it's important that we partner on that.
Let me just set the record straight. I don't know. I'm sure if I'm going to do all those terms, but I do think it's just to lift up, going back to some of the other questions around, why we implement the policies that we implement, even around welcoming city. The relationship between law enforcement and the community is so critical to our overall safety plan. And the more we build that confidence between law enforcement and the community, I'm confident that it's going to lead to better results. I was just in West Humble Park earlier today, and look, we still have challenges, right? Some open drug markets and some of the other safety concerns, but people are getting organized around there. I was in a church basement this morning, probably 50 people in the room who were all, committed to the type of connections that we have to have. And the new 11th District Commander Tate was there, and some of the other police officers were there. Groups that hire people were there. State Representative Lillian Jimenez was there as well. The faith community was there. What I'm ultimately saying is that it really is going to take all of us to come together collectively to repair the damage that has been done from decades ago. But we are a different Chicago. We're a better Chicago, and we're certainly heading in the right direction. Thank you for those questions. Yes,
Good afternoon. As the mother of a college rugby player, I have to note Chicago Hounds are also #1 right now. So the Trump administration's Department of Education is threatening more than $1 billion in CPS funding if CPS doesn't get rid of its quote-unquote DEI policies. I've talked to the Department of Education, I've talked to ISB, and no one really seems to want to specify what it means to get rid of those DEI policies. What is your understanding of what they're pressuring CPS and other districts to do?
My firm belief is that this administration just simply wants to wipe away the fabric of our cities and our institutions. We talk about public education a lot in this city and over decades, rightfully so. There's been ongoing struggles, right? And I've said this before, our challenges in Chicago did not start with Donald Trump. One of the greatest, I believe, acts of terror that was ever administered by an administration was the Emanuel administration. I will never forget the closing of all of those schools, particularly in the Black and brown community. I will never forget that. In fact, it was in part my motivation to get involved in politics. And it's that type of extremism that has led to the dismantling of many of our public assets, right? Closing down of our mental health facilities, eradicating public and affordable housing. And whether it's the Trump administration or anyone else who has attacked our democracy in that way, that this is not about simply a feeling or an interpretation. This is about a direct assault on our democracy. And again, and I hope this doesn't sound hyperbolic, when forces want to intimidate and erode and disrupt democracies, they go after the institutions, and particularly our public institutions. There are individuals who firmly believe that the teaching of Black history, Asian American history, is a threat to their privilege. Right? This is coming from one particular direction. And I'll pass it to my chief of staff because she, she's a PhD. She's been a state senator in the Illinois State Board of Education. Perhaps you can offer up some more context.
Yeah, I mean, it seems as though what he is attempting to do by dismantling the Department of Education is to erase history, to rewrite it, and to privilege a particular perspective that's in alignment with his ideological standings. I think one thing that has been effective in this discussion is understanding what is the role of the federal government in education, what is the role of the state, and then what is the role of the local government. That starts to kind of unpack the different levers that each of those governments have. But, you know, all of this essentially is a distraction, but it's also not a surprise. Project 2025 outlined every single step that we are seeing today. And this is just another testament. When people tell you who they are and what they're going to do, believe them and make sure you have plans to mitigate, but also not to just survive, but to transform systems for the better so that 40 years from now, our children, grandchildren can be talking about what we did in this exact moment during this particular period when you have somebody that has reckless decisions and reckless plans to essentially disappear people and eliminate what we have done and fought so hard for.
All right, switching gears a little bit, Axios is looking at data centers in the Midwest and how they're booming. Illinois is a big leader in terms of placing data centers. Are you in favor of putting any more in the city and state legislation pushing for more transparency about how much energy and how much water they use?
Well, there's certainly a commitment to making sure that our sustainability efforts are not undermined. That's something that's important to me. There's been an ongoing conversation around data centers in Chicago. What I can say is that I have been open to the conversation. I have been open to it with some level of caveat, the one that you just mentioned in particular. I know that there are a number of entities that are exploring different locations in Chicago. Those conversations have been relatively productive, and there's still a lot to learn and to be determined of, one, not just their footprint, but the type of job opportunities that are provided. And there's been some good discussions, particularly around minority-owned data center entities. So again, open to the conversation, but again, still looking to figure out what the footprint looks like and whether or not, you know, Chicago is the ultimate viable place for some of these locations. So I appreciate you all today. Thank you for being patient with me.
Thank you all.
Thank you.